Hi, I'm Lewis, also known as Skeffles, and this is my 15th devlog for my tower defense game, Project Torrim. Last week I worked on serialization of my level data, to make saving and loading easier, as well as some smaller tweaks to the level editor. This week I hope to finish off the rest of the level editor tweaks to the point I can actually use the editor to create a level. I'm incredibly excited about this. I've been working on the editor since Devlog 8, so it'll be really refreshing to get back to the game and develop some playable content. Let's start off with the tweaks to the editor. There are some issues I've noticed with my resizable objects. The first issue was that objects were still interactable even if they're on a different layer. So I fixed this by disabling objects when moving off their layer. The second issue with resizable objects was they would always get saved if you ever placed one down. Even if you deleted the object, it would still come back when you reloaded the level. This was because the disposal of the object didn't remove it from the list in the grid. To fix this, I made sure the object was always removed from the list when it was being disposed of. The next couple of tweaks were with the tile selection buttons. The first of these issues was that you could not deselect the tile button after you had selected it. This annoyed me, so I changed the button logic to deselect the button if it was already selected. The second tile selection button issue was with the size of sprites. I've pointed this out in past devlogs, but the size of a sprite on a button can be bigger than the button itself. I quite like the fact that you could see the size of the sprite you're going to place down in a level, but I dislike the fact that the sprite will cover up other buttons. I fixed this by having sprites that are larger than the button scale down to fit into the button itself. This feels like a neat solution, although square sprites still take up the entire button, so I'm considering having those sprites scaled to just be slightly smaller than the button, but I don't know if that's necessary. The next tweak is a small adjustment to the main camera so it doesn't interfere with the UI. This is another thing I've pointed out in past devlogs. The camera can move and grid items can be placed when your mouse is on the edge of the UI. This was easy to fix. I made sure the size of the main camera was correct and adjusted its position by a small amount. In the future, I'd like to introduce a function to do this sort of thing for me. The next tweak I had was even smaller than that. It was for the scroll bar's appearance. I adjusted this by making sure the slider had an appropriate sprite and increasing the visibility of the background. This makes using the slider much nicer, although in the future I'd like to improve it to act like a standard scroll bar found in every other program you've ever used. The final tweak for the level editor was actually quite big, and this was to generate the file that the level editor uses to show the available sprites and classes. The first thing I needed to do to generate this file was to gather all of the appropriate classes from the game engine. To do this, I implemented an attribute class that can be applied to any class. The attribute class takes in information for the tile in the editor, such as sprite name, if it's a repeating texture, and if it's resizable. Once the attribute's been applied to the relevant class, the file generator looks for all the classes with the attribute and adds the tile information to a list. The second thing I needed was to add all the sprites from the project to that list. To get all of the sprites, I decided to iterate through the files within the content folder. This was similar to what I originally did in earlier stages of the editor, however that was just one subfolder. Now I wanted to get everything in the content folder. The issue with getting everything in the folder is that not everything there is a sprite, so I needed a way of differentiating between different types of content. My initial approach was to look for a Texture 2D reader within the file, but unfortunately fonts also contain Texture 2D readers, so I had to use a different approach. I ended up using some regex to find all of the content types within the file, and then just inspected the first one because that was the one I was interested in. Once I had confirmed the file was for a sprite, I added its information to the list. With the list of classes and sprites made, I used a JSON serializer to write all of that information to the file that the editor uses to show the available tiles. I've now finished the core of the level editor. Over the last 7 devlogs I've developed all of the features I wanted and fixed the bugs I've spotted. Whilst I do have a lot more ideas for the editor, they are mostly things that would just be nice to have, and I'd rather get back into developing content for the game. So to end this week, I'm going to replicate my original Paint.net level with the level editor. This should give me a good idea what it's like to use the editor and help me transition back into game content development. So let's see how that goes. here's the level that I've made in the editor. The level editor makes it look a little more cluttered than the original version, but you can see it's very similar. The best part about this is that I have placements for classes within the editor, so the path will generate its own collision area, and the white crosses represent pathfinding nodes for the enemies. I am absolutely thrilled with this progress. Now I have a decent level editor, I'm able to create a wider variety of levels than I could have before. No more measuring and manual creation of level assets, I can just place them directly into the scene. Thanks for watching this devlog for Project Torrim. I'm having a blast working on this game, and I hope you're enjoying watching. Don't forget to leave the video a like to let me know you enjoyed it, and comment to give me any feedback. With the level editor complete, I can move on to developing game content from next week, so remember to subscribe to keep up to date with all of that progress. Thank you, and goodbye.